All right, Ezekiel chapter 19. We're getting well into the book of Ezekiel, which is awesome. Some great, profound things we get to learn from here. I hope you're falling in love with this book. I hope you're seeing the value of what Ezekiel has for us. We hear his name, but we don't think about what he's teaching. So even though he is in exile in Babylon, with the other exiles, he is dealing with those challenges. He's not at Jerusalem with Jeremiah. He's dealing with another set of challenges. He still has some great, profound things for us to learn. Now, in this chapter, we're going to see a couple more metaphors about the problems of Israel. Basically, Ezekiel's kind of lamenting Israel at this point, going, man, these people have gone bad. This is a challenge. This is a big problem we have. So, but I want you to think about some things in this, okay? The thing to realize is we're going to see some metaphors used, and these metaphors have been used in the past. So think of them in a duality situation here, because that gives us a little more insight into what we're going to learn, basically. So verse 1, moreover, take thou up a lamentation for the princes of Israel, and say, what is thy mother? A lioness? She lay down among lions, she nourished her whelps among young lions, and she brought up one of her whelps, and it became a young lion, and it learned to catch the prey, it devoured men. So let's pause for a second here, okay? This is a reference to Judah, which is the royal house. A lion is a royal animal, the animal kingdom, okay? Sidney Sperry's Voice of Israel's Prophets had this to say, says, the interpretation of this allegory seems fairly clear. The lioness, if not the doomed country, Judah, is Hamutal, the mother of Zedekiah. The first of her whelps would then be Jehoahaz, who after reigning for a short time was taken prisoner to Egypt by Pharaoh-nechoh. So he's using this idea of the lioness, this royal family, as this idea of saying, what was her name again? Hamutal. So Hamutal was the queen, and she had children. Jehoahaz was one of her children, and he was taken by Pharaoh-nechoh when Pharaoh-nechoh came up to help Assyria out. When Babylon was destroying Assyria, Pharaoh-nechoh came up to help Assyria and then lost as Assyria died and Babylon took over. On their way through that battle, basically Pharaoh-nechoh takes the opportunity to replace the king on the throne of Israel, basically. So first of her whelps would then be Jehoahaz, who after reigning for a short time was taken prisoner to Egypt by Pharaoh-nechoh. Jehoahaz was in turn succeeded by Jehoiakim, a son of Josiah, by a wife other than Hamutal. So her son got taken to Egypt, and it's where he later dies. So another son of Josiah, okay, so Josiah was the righteous king. At the beginning of Jeremiah, we learn about him a lot. He's the one he tried to legislatively enforce religion. It didn't work quite well, unfortunately. So his other son, Jehoiakim, becomes the king of Israel, basically, at this time. So Jehoiakim was succeeded by his son, Jehoiachin. So Jehoiakim started siding with Egypt again, and Jehoiakim got taken out was killed, and then Jehoiakim was brought in, and when Nebuchadrezzar came through, he took Jehoiachin, and moved him in the first exile, to Babylon. And then that's when Zedekiah got put in, basically. When the last named was taken captive by the Babylonians, Hamutal's second son, Zedekiah, was appointed king in his stead. He must therefore be the other whelp of the allegory. When taken captive by Nebuchadrezzar and carried to Babylon, Zedekiah fulfilled the requirements of the last two verses. So that's what this chapter is going to talk about, is this dynamic. So she brought up her whelps. So this is her heritage, basically. So Israel's a young lion. They do not see the potential. They just see the worldliness and want it. So we could think of this as literally the kingship, but we can think of this as the young lion as Israel, growing up, gaining their resources, but then wanting something else, basically. Verse 4, the nations also heard of him. He was taken in their pit. They brought him with chains unto the land of Egypt. So that's that's this idea. So we can see this again reflected in the kingship of Israel, but we can also see this as a metaphor of Israel overall. We've used this metaphor, I think it was in Isaiah, they used the metaphor of Israel as a lion before, basically. So that's the kind of a duality we get here. Verse 5, now when she saw that she had waited and her hope was lost, she then took another of her whelps and made him a young lion. And he went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion, learned to catch prey, and devoured men. He knew their desolate palaces. He laid waste their cities, and the land was desolate, and the fullness thereof, by the noise of his roaring. Then the nations set against him on every side from the provinces, and spread their net over him. He was taken in their pit, and they put him in ward and chains, and brought him to the king of Babylon. They brought him into holds, and his voice should no more be heard upon the mountain of Israel. So this is that same, again, we can see this idea of that was Zedekiah, and he tried to rule and say, I'm great and amazing, and Babylon went, nope, you're not. We're gonna take you out. Zedekiah was never really heard much of again. His story ends at that point. But you can kind of see overall in Israel tries to grow up, then they get prideful and think, we are the kings of the world, we are amazing, and all the other people around them went, nope, you're not, and they got taken out, basically, because they got prideful. God wasn't with them anymore, and they lost. Now, verse 10, thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters. So this is a second metaphor. Verse 11, and she had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule, and her stature was exalted among the thick branches. She appeared in her height with the multitude of her branches. But she was plucked up in fury. She was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried up her fruit. Her strong rods were broken and withered. The fire consumed them. So we can think of the east wind as Babylon coming in to destroy everything. Verse 13, and now she is planted in the wilderness in a dry, thirsty ground, and fire is gone out of a rod of her branches, which hath devoured her fruit, so that she hath no strong rod to be a scepter to rule. This is a lamentation and shall be for a lamentation. So both of these metaphors are about understanding that the kingship is gone. Israel has lost their prior glory, and they are a very humbled community at this point, basically. Bible commentary says, none of the blood royal of Judah was left, and from that time not one of her own royal race ever sat upon the throne of Israel. So now Jehoiachin is still a blood relative of the king, but not the blood relative of Hamutal, basically. Josiah had multiple wives. So Hamutal's line ended. But another one of Josiah's wives, where the Jehoiachin comes through, he gets to follow that bloodline, which is the one that Christ comes through, that Matthew talks about. So that's Ezekiel 19. This is Ezekiel again lamenting that they've gone bad. Zion, Jerusalem, Israel is no longer its glorious self anymore. It's going to take some time to make that repentance process happen so that they come back around, basically. So let's jump over to chapter 20 as we continue to move forward in the book of Ezekiel.